So just recently, Zack Snyder did a AMA on Reddit about the movie Watchmen. You know, one of those movies that most people can somewhat agree that was good. And in which, people started asking about the gritty undertones about the DC movies. And to paraphrase here, he added that he really wishes everyone would wake the fuck up and move on already. To quote Snyder, "Once you lost your virginity to this fucking movie and you can come and say to me something like, my superhero wouldn't do that, I'm like, are you serious? I'm like down the fucking road on that. It's a cool point of view to be like, my heroes are innocent. My heroes don't fucking lie to America. My heroes don't embezzle money from corporations. My heroes don't commit any atrocities. That's cool, but you live in a fucking dream world." That is director of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and technically co-director of Justice League right there for you folks. Now this is an ongoing feud with me and a few other people who like those movies. Some would dare say would love those movies. For the longest time I never had an actual worst movie I've ever seen. I watch a lot of trash. I love trash movies. They are great. Not great technically speaking, very objectively, they're horrible, but you can enjoy bad trash. Man of Steel, while functionally is a well-made film, the story, the plot, the direction, the cinematography, practically all that movie just infuriates the fucking hell out of me. And now you see by the director's own words that he really has no fucking understanding of the character of Superman. He was in charge of revitalize the DC universe and give us this new expanded universe. Where do I fucking begin? So let's talk about Man of Steel. Oh boy. Man of Steel doesn't know what it wants to be as a movie. It really wants to be this postmodernistic interpretation of the superhero genre. It wants to take a critical look at the superhero, especially Superman himself. A character who is 80 years old at this point, but it doesn't really ask any good questions. It's really just a scathing critique with no real depth. And that's not even the issue I have. That could have been actual good. Critique why the world needs a Superman. But guess what? People have been doing that in the comics for a few years now. Alan Moore wrote the story Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which would have been a great analysis, but instead of choosing Alan Moore as the essential inspiration for Superman, he chose Frank Miller. Specifically, he chose Frank Miller's book The Dark Knight Returns, which for its time it was a great book. And Superman in that is basically part of the corporate machine. And that's because, well, we find out later that he was essentially being blackmailed into doing it. Clark did not want to fight Batman, and that was even text. But somehow Zack Snyder went, this is who Superman really is. Let's make a movie about that. The problem is the text of Man of Steel isn't about that. And that's where we get a lot of narrative dissonance in Man of Steel, which makes a lot of the movie unbearable, outside of shaky cam cinematography. I am still critical of the Goya script. It felt so wishy-washy on what it wanted to say about Superman and his origin. But we've got to try and figure out how much of that is part of the script, how much of part of that was the Snyder influence, because there's all this Jesus allegory throughout the entire movie. You can do the martyr savior trope, but when you get so far in and you're just slathering it with Jesus metaphor, it starts to become, well, not just redundant, but it starts to just become painful. Like the literal scene where Clark is in the church and there's Jesus behind him, and then every single time he does something, he has to do the Jesus Christ pose. There's no subtlety. But that's not even the worst of this movie. The movie is constantly trying to tell you about this conflict within Superman. Will he save people or will he won't save people? And Dan Olson does a really good video about this on Unfolding Ideas, whereabouts, the movie sets up a question.
They are 1, the power to choose between good and evil, abstracted as the power to choose your own destiny. 2, the rejection of the unknown / fear of rejection. And 3, cleansing the sins of Krypton. Here's the problem. They set these themes up in the prologue, but we still don't know how Clark is going to interact with them. How does he feel about these issues? How have they shaped him? Does he even care? And the movie tells us it doesn't really matter because more or less the first thing Clark actively does in the movie is save a bunch of people. That's the foot we start out on. It's not a terrible foot to start a Superman film on, but it's a terrible one to start this Superman film out on because it guts the tension before we even get to it. Later, when we flash back to Pa Kent telling teenage Clark that he might have to make the hard decisions where he chooses between saving people and remaining anonymous, it's just wasted breath. We already know that Clark is running around doing good, then slinking away when no one's looking. I mean, yes, it's a Superman movie, we ultimately know what side he's going to choose, but that's not the point. The point is, the tension of watching him make that choice, and the catharsis of having the narrative confirmed, because let's face it, a Superman narrative is about as ritualistic as it gets this side of High Mass, is gone because we already have the answer before the movie has finished asking the question.
That's pretty terrible filmmaking. Not saying that a linear telling of Man of Steel would have made it better, it actually probably made it far more tedious, but the disconnection between a lot of those setups and the payoffs don't work. The movie is ramming down your throat this idea that Superman is about hope. They say hope so many damn fucking times. They even go, oh, this thing right here, that's hope. The S means hope. They literally say that as text. Lois even makes a joke saying, well, on our planet, it's an S. God, they didn't even let fucking Lois, the canonical namer of Superman in practically all instances. The movie doesn't even let Lois say the word Superman. Superman is named by a random fucking military guy like, oh, people are calling him Superman. Meh. It's such an offhanded comment. And it's treated with the dignity that this movie treats Superman throughout. So back to hope. There's all these moments where you could have used Superman as a beacon of hope, which the movie is constantly telling you he is. Never showing you, but it's constantly telling you it is. And that is also, again, another form of dissonance. Superman as a beacon of hope never inspires hope. Superman in a costume, in the literal garb that we associate this character as Superman, it never saves lives. Now, Clark Kent as a small boy saves a busload of his school peers. The bearded hobo called Aquaman literally saves more lives than the figure known as Superman. Superman beats people up. He throws things into buildings. He technically stops bad people. He doesn't save anyone though. There's a scene in Superman Returns just before he goes to confront Lex Luthor on the island. Superman is actively saving people from the earthquakes. It also demonstrates cinematically several things. It shows you his breath. It shows you his heat vision. His X-ray vision. His strength and his flight. And he does this to save people's lives. We really don't get any demonstration of who Superman is in this film. And for a movie that's ostensibly talking about how good and hopeful and inspirational this character is, he doesn't do any of that. And that's also one of the bad points, because this text is telling you that this character's goal is to try and rise above the teachings of both of his fathers, but it doesn't really even answer the conflict between his Earth parentage and his Kryptonian parentage. For comparison, the 77 movie, Jor-El is seen as this godlike character. Marlon Brando probably helped inspire that. But Superman is so restricted by his Kryptonian father, the one who's responsible for giving him all this power and all this education, that almost Jonathan Kent becomes a forethought after Superman goes to the North Pole and discovers his heritage. But the crucial moment where Superman has to decide if he's going to disobey the authoritarian Kryptonian father, Jonathan Kent inspires his son to do the right thing. It's a very powerful moment, because this is that moment where Clark is deciding essentially who he is, and there's no moments like this in Man of Steel. Absolutely zero. The movie is an absolute pile. The movie doesn't know really what it wants to be. It wants to start this universe off. That was DC's clear intention. But they start off with a hero no one actually likes. The romance between Clark and Lois only occurs because there are two characters named Clark Kent and Lois Lane, and we know they have to get it on. The problem is that the script just has them hook up. And what's even worse, they had that awkward shift after Clark Kent just murdered somebody. Now, unlike a lot of people, I have no issues with the death scene. Shock horror. I think it was just absolutely blundered, to be honest. And here's the several viewpoints on that. It's okay if you want to have that to be a big moment. In fact, I can't see how they could have done anything else, realistically speaking, in this movie. They did not set up that there was a conflict with Superman and death, or at least him being responsible for death. He's always saving lives, we know that, but that just seems to be an innate thing. He's always trying to save people's lives. Wouldn't that have been more interesting if he was actually trying to save Zod's life? He was trying to prevent Zod from killing himself, maybe as a way to try and, no, you've got to be accountable for your crimes. So not even the conflict between the actual explicit setup that Clark tries to save people's lives and the death of Zod has no connection. We also have no thing of Clark being averse to killing. He seems to very much want to punch people's heads off within 5 seconds. Violence seemed to be very innate in his actions at the last act of that film. But there's no setup. Jonathan Kent's explicit text is, maybe just let people die. Fucking hell. Jonathan Kent is the parent that says, I want you to be special. And at the next moment, no, I don't want you to be special. I want you to be a farmer. I don't think you've got all these powers. That's just good for super farming. Fuck him. It would have been stronger if there was even this ethical question established earlier on in the movie when they're establishing literally everything else about the responsibility Clark has even with his powers. Let's imagine if in this movie, this could be dark and would be brilliant. What if Clark's use of his powers actually led to a death in his childhood? And now he has a thing about, I don't want to lead to another person's death. That's way more stronger than what was established in Man of Steel. The other major part of this blunder. So the scene is basically that Metropolis is pretty much a crater now. They're beating each other through the streets and everything, and they land in, I'm guessing it's the Metropolis version of Grand Central Station. Zod is lasering his I-beams towards this family who are cowering for their life. And then Superman has to make the decision to snap his neck. If Superman could move his head that easily, why didn't he just move the head away from people? I mean, yes, eyes can move independently. Geez, even just covering his eyes for 5 seconds, even if you've proven like, oh my God, that burnt his hand or something like that, just a hand action, it would have been at least an attempt to find a different way. This leads to the most ridiculous part of that. This family is cowering in this area, and the I-beams are coming towards them. So Lois comes down as this is happening, and she witnesses Superman breaking Zod's neck. So of course, there's the witness. She's witness to this painful thing that Superman's had to do. And as soon as the I-beams, which are coming in this direction, remember, and the family is here, as soon as that's finished, what happens? They run off that way. Why didn't they move before the I-beams hit them? It was just bad. It was just bad. And also, they weren't even pinned down. They were freely moving. Why didn't they just move away? Why didn't they just keep moving? No, it was just badly done. So how could you have done that better? The way I see it, lose the family. There's no emotional stakes there. Lois is there, Lois is pinned. Lois literally cannot move. That ticking clock actually has a point. If Zod knowing the connection between Lois and Superman actually gives him motivation to not only just to kill Lois, but to make it painful and tortuous. And if anything, it's to give Clark the thing of like, you've got to make a choice now. You either, it's me or her. That would have been emotionally a lot better and potentially darker, because then the last Kryptonian has to kill his other fellow Kryptonian to save the woman he loves who is an Earth person. This also becomes what is the subtext has been talking about, Clark choosing between Krypton and Earth. This would have been brilliant. Having killed Zod, freeing Lois, then you could have had the emotional bit. How about maybe having Superman break down at that point because of all that happened? And maybe then they could have embraced, or at least had something more emotionally attached to that than they say it all goes downhill after the first kiss. There's so many things that could have made Man of Steel brilliant. It's almost like I was watching this movie and I was expecting this moment that would make me love this film, and it never happened. There's literally a moment where the character we're supposed to think is Jimmy Olsen, who though then that gets retconned later, but Jenny Olsen is trapped under some debris, and Perry White is there with some other people trying to dig her out, and they're using like I think it's like a steel girder as leverage to get the rubble off. And it's all the can't move it, can't move it moments. And of course, this is all the height of the tension between Superman blowing up the Doomsday device and rushing back to Metropolis. That was the part of the movie I was wanting deeply. Just one gimme. This entire miserable experience of a movie, the one gimme I wanted so desperately much. And the movie was building up to it, where Superman, flies over this group of people trying to rescue Jenny and lifts off the one big heavy thing that's restricted and then flies off. It could have just been that. That was literally a moment, would have been a moment of hope. It would have been purely in character. It would have been phenomenal. No, Perry Wright and everything just rescues Jenny. And it's kind of thrown away. You have this build-up of this really big thing and nothing comes of it. That's pretty much this movie in a nutshell. Nothing. Fuck Man of Steel. Fuck it. So then we come to the other question. Snyder's comments were a lot to do with people criticizing about Batman murdering people. Now again, I want to point out Dan Olsen's really cool video, which is all the deaths Batman causes in Batman 5 Superman.
Next up, the Batmobile launches out of the second story of a processing plant, shearing off a substantial chunk of the rear of this truck, including this man's head, and immediately broadsiding a van occupied by a driver and a gunner. The collision with the passenger side almost certainly kills the gunner, though the fate of the driver is unknown.
And it's about a dozen at least. And he's going, oh, Batman's always killed people. Let's just quickly go over that. In the original comic books, because they were more rooted in pulp, as I've talked about before in the past, Batman had a gun, Batman killed bad guys, or at least shot bad guys. Because Batman was a detective series, it wasn't a superhero series. Detectives in crime, they shot the bad guys. Now, in fact, the original appearance of the Joker, he was supposed to have been killed at the end of his appearance, but someone, quite possibly Bill Finger, because he was actually the one that seemed to be the smart one of the two co-creators, turned around and went, well, no, we should keep this guy around, because he's pretty interesting. And now we can't get rid of the Joker. So when Batman started to become less detective-y and more superhero-y, that pretty much started to go away. You couldn't really have your heroes be murderers. This, of course, got even more explicitly so with the creation of the Comics Code Authority, which pretty much outright banned crime in comic books, and the heroes had to be pretty much upstanding citizens, which of course also got reinforced by the campiness of the late 50s, early 60s superhero genre, where Batman would have adventures in outer space, and then you got the ridiculous things like the what if stuff, like, Batman got turned into Batboy, or why does he have like a ridiculous amount of multicolored suits, and Zebra Batman, Bullseye Batman, and all this other weirdness. And then of course, they got 66 series, which even completely ignored the Batman origin story of his parents being killed. It's just Batman's just being Batman. And of course, part of the mythology would eventually evolve as more and more writers come on board. People like Frank Miller, who admittedly I don't like him, but his early Batman stuff was actually very smart and inventive for trying to redevelop his character. You have people like Neil Adams and all these other great talents on board trying to really get that personality and that origin nailed down, and especially particularly post-crisis and all this other stuff. The missing years of Batman as he was wandering around after his parents had died. All this cool stuff. And you get this character that hates guns, It's particularly in the fact that it was that weapon, specifically that weapon, that murdered his parents. So you get this, this idea, this character is kind of this almost grown-up child with this ridiculous ambition to prevent people being murdered as part of his ethos. And before we even get to Batman versus Superman, we've got movie representations where Batman does indeed kill. Let's go back to Batman 1989. While Batman specifically himself isn't shown to be killing anyone, there is the Axis chemical plant explosion caused by the Batmobile dropping bombs literally in front of people. Of course, these had to be remote detonated because I don't think the Batmobile had AI, but Batman killed people. In Batman Returns, we're quite explicitly shown Batman attaching a bomb to the big heavy circus performer for knocking him into the sewers, and 10 seconds later, boom. Even if it got dislodged, the explosion of shrapnel probably killed the guy, and he never turns back up. Batman Forever. Not really much of a death count there, but you could argue that he caused the death of Two-Face when he threw up all the extra coins, leading Two-Face to lose his balance, plummet and fall to his death. Probably the most bloodless Batman death is, at that point, would have been Batman and Robin. There you go. Now, for the Nolan trilogy, I can't remember, it's been so long since I've seen them that it's hard to really fathom like how many people died in things like the explosions and the when he burned down the Ra's al Ghul's monastery and all that other stuff. I don't know, I'm sure someone has those statistics out there. Needless to say, Batman in the Snyderverse has killed more people than all those put together, assumably. Depends on how many people Batman killed in the Axis chemical fire. Probably about a dozen. So yeah, almost enough in one movie over 4 other movies. Yeah, kind of horrible when you think about it like that. Do I think Batman needed to kill people in Batman v Superman? Not really. I don't think he needed to kill people to put the point across. In fact, the problem is that Batman killing people in Batman v Superman makes Batman into a supremely huge hypocrite, because his big problem apparently with Superman is that people died during the Kryptonian invasion in Man of Steel. So his whole thing is, how many lives are going to be lost? Then he's going around murdering people. He's shooting people with machine guns. He's causing cars to explode and flip end on 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 end. He's harpooning people. He's causing so much damage. Batman causes more direct death in one movie than the person he hates the most. People, want to say, oh, it's the manipulation through Lex Luthor. Bruce Wayne clearly had a grudge before Lex even kind of got into the deal. That scene at the opening of the movie shows you Bruce is angry at this Kryptonian and he's going to get his revenge. That's literally the point of the opening freaking shot. It would have been interesting if Batman at least had the moral high ground in that movie, but he doesn't, and that makes it even worse. Because even the literal inspiration for this movie, like literally pages and pages are lifted straight out of the text, The Dark Knight Returns. Batman makes a point of saying that in his machine gun Batmobile, he's using rubber bullets. He's using non-lethal tactics. I guess Snyder forgot to read that part. I'm so sick and tired of people defending the Snyderverse as a good and interesting take on these characters, because they're clearly not. The guy has no idea. Then again, he is a guy who wants to make movies about Ayn Randian's books, specifically The Fountainhead. So if you enjoyed this video or not, please click one of the little buttons down below, comment and share. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, and if you want to be notified when this or any other of my videos go up, please hit the button down below. If you made it this far, thanks. This is something I've been wanting to get off my chest. I've been wanting to do a full deep dive into the terribleness of Zack Snyder, but I've just given an opportunity. I want to get some of this funk out there, because I'm really kind of sick and tired of this whole DC and Marvel is better, or DC is better because it's darker, Marvel's too light and fluffy. We can have dark movies, we can have light fluffy movies, but we need people to understand why heroes are appreciated and loved. And I don't think Zack Snyder is the person to do that. So next time, see ya.